If you're a Pittsburgh baseball fan, then this is the podcast for you. Make your way down, grab a beverage, and get ready to talk Pirates with myself, Craig Toth, and Scott Jackson, two of the biggest fans you'll ever meet. This is Bucks in the Basement.
Now I see the changes in this town. They change, they say one thing, but then the next day it's different. They change, but they don't know what they want. All they do is change. Going left, going right, travel day, travel night. That's where we'll go. No excuses, no goodbyes, no one cries, no one lies. We'll never know.
I'm not one to go all out on X or Facebook. I mean, if a lot of people follow me, you see that I just basically retweet stuff that I think people might find interesting, that I find interesting, something that I read. But I did feel the need to respond to a tweet that was put out there. I'm going to give the credit here. It was Pirates Faithful, at Pirates Faithful, said, I've been doing this Pirates thing with understanding for about 24 years. I'm 34 years old. No idea how some of you old timers are hanging in there. Granted, you got to see some World Series wins. My response, I'm in Pirates purgatory age group, born prior to the 1979 championship, but not old enough to remember it, had my teenage heart broken by Bream, went through 20 years of losing, got some of the spark back in 2013 through 15, and now here we are. And now here we are recording on the day Derek Shelton is gone. Scott, how you doing today, brother?
I'm doing all right. I think we all saw this coming. Now, the impact that it's going to have, I don't know, and we'll get into that. It feels almost like, the move was made, it was overdue, but the way social media is handling it, they've essentially been appeased. They've been calling for it for quite a while, and now a lot of people on Pirates Twitter or X or whatever, they're just kind of like, okay, what's next? I mean, they're ready to move on to the next thing, and some people are even saying, how long until Donnie Kelly gets thrown under the bus?
Yeah. And that's the thing. I mean, this first one of the things you kind of texted me was that Donnie Keller did not get that interim status. He got the vote of confidence, and Cherington backed that up in his conference with the Pirates media that basically said manager for 2025. And this is something that, I mean, we've kind of even discussed going back to the end of the offseason, or I should say the beginning of the offseason, where, should Derek Shelton have even been brought back? I think that in 2023, he kind of saved his job with the run that the team went on towards the end of the season. At the end of last season, I mean, the first time we ever recorded together was right after the trade deadline. Things were kind of looking up before they had their skid, 10-game losing streak. And the next thing you know, things are out the window, never really got it back together. So I think he maybe have bought himself at least another year. And this one, I mean, it was just very strange. The whole accountable together, the vote of confidence in Shelton, but sometimes that vote of confidence is also the kiss of death.
Yeah. In the press conference, he was talking about how Cherington was talking about how the last season ended, and we talked about it in the off season about how a different feeling is perceived, and you have a different feeling depending on how you end the season. Like you said, in 2023, they went on that run, and you go into the off season on an upswing. Last season, they went on a downswing, and it just seemed like something happened after that trade deadline where Shelton seemed to lose the clubhouse. They didn't have the same kind of fight in them that they had had previously, and that carried over into spring training, into the beginning of this season. And Carrington denied it. And what's he supposed to say in the press conference? But it really felt like he lost the clubhouse, and that Shelton, whether you want to put it on him or not, I mean, I was thinking about it today. This is like, Cherington buying the groceries and expecting Shelton to cook, but he gives him a bunch of frozen dinner and cat food and says, go ahead and make a 5-star meal. Shelton can only work with what he's given, but that was a hallmark of his tenure at the very beginning. Is he got the most out of those guys, even from the very beginning, where they had that sit down with Musgrove and Shelton, and they were Permane brothers. Shelton said all the right things. I was ready to run through a wall for him, and then and he got the best out of his players for a good stretch. But I don't know if the messaging got stale, if the veterans turned it off, if it clashed with some of the clubhouse culture. Maybe it's just as much as these guys that are the foundation, your Reynolds, your Hayes, your Cruzes, Mitch, all these guys just got tired of hearing the same thing for 6 years.
Yeah, I don't really know because I mean, when Shelton was hired, I believe I called him either the starter manager or the play setting manager. He's the guy that gets you through that rebuild. He's kind of like a player's coach. We've talked about it a bunch of times about how it seemed like no, even when they were losing, all the players still, really like Shelty. You'd have those interactions. I know that a lot of them are people would say it's like kind of for the camera, but it definitely seemed to be real. But then when it came time to get over the hump, it just never really happened. Maybe not the best moves made by Cherington at the deadline, but just going back to 2023, I can't stop thinking about it. Is you basically trade off Carlos Santana, you throw together a mismatch bunch at first base, and you get some work out of that. I mean, I know Triolo caught fire at that point in time. You're rolling with what is a two starter pitching staff. I mean, there were some guys in there that could be used as starters. And then last year, you have, your play set and you can't even get that over to anything. I know that, you bring in Brian De La Cruz, but you do bring in IKF. I know it was coming off of the injury. He doesn't really come back, but I mean, you have Paul Skeens, you have Bailey Falter, you have Jared Jones coming back from injury. It looked like you had at least somewhat more to work with. You had at that point in time a hot Rowdy Tellez. I don't want to talk about what Rowdy's doing this year because it would make Pirates fans cry. But you kind of got him back off of his injury. He got a slow start, and you even had him hot at that point in time, and you really couldn't get anything going. You see Cruz really starting to steal bases towards the second half of that year, and the wins never really came. So, I mean, that was kind of the death rattle for Shelton, and I think that's why so many of us were surprised that he was brought back this year. But yeah, I mean, it's been out there. I know that I saw you posting some stuff. You messaged me some stuff. It's just like it can't go on any longer than this. Like can it? I mean, it's got to be time. And Shelton. I mean, they did. Cherington did give him his kudos and said, he put his blood, sweat, and tears into it for 5+ years, and I do believe that he did that. But yeah, I mean, I think this is like one of those things where, yeah, you never want to get fired. But
Mhm.
I mean, if I was Shelton, I would have probably, pour myself a bourbon tonight and wake up the next morning and almost feel a sense of relief because of how bad this season started, how much pressure was on him. And yeah, I mean, goes on to Donnie Kelly now, which we're absolutely going to get into. But I mean, for Shelton, in some ways, it has to be, like I said, a little bit of a weight lifted off your shoulders because it's just
Yeah.
like, God, like how much longer can I do this?
Yeah, like I said, pour that bourbon and just say I did the best I could. And you can't always. He's not the one that's taking the swings in the batter's box. He's not the one that's pitching. He's not the one coming out of the bullpen. He can only put the guys in the best position that he can. Um, Yeah, it just wasn't there for him. And I like him. I think he's a good baseball man, and I hope he catches on somewhere. And but just write out the rest of your contract, get paid. You know, Uh, he's been through it for the last full 5 years, and man, just wish him the best going forward. But it's a tough spot that Don Kelly's coming into. At least the expectations aren't high for him.
Yeah,
He doesn't
and
he doesn't have the players to really. It's you can't get much worse.
yeah, and at this point in time, like I had already kind of started to like pre-prep if, Shelton hadn't been fired. And we had talked, a few weeks ago about how he was pulling the right strings with the bullpen, playing the matchups, thought he was doing something different. And even when he would do that with like bringing in, Chase Shugart and then he gets shelled, for the first time this year, it's just basically like at that point in time, like, what can go wrong will go wrong at that point in time. But like you said, Don Kelly, I call him Donnie Kelly, from back in the day. I'm pretty sure that's what Jim Leland calls him as well. One of Jim Leland's favorite players, and I like Donnie Kelly, and kind of like I'll just use the word, the moxie that he brought to baseball when he played it was never like that all-star, was never like that great player, but he was one of those technically sound players. The glue that kind of held the team together, would give you a hit in a big situation, and just played baseball kind of the way it should be played. The one thing I think about Donnie Kelly is how quickly he taught Jared Triolo to kind of play first base, and Jared giving him the kudos for that. But then the other thing to me is that, I mean, we've talked about it. I talked about it even going back a couple of years, saying that Donnie Kelly and Derek Shelton were the ones that would sit down and they would write these lineups, and they would make these lineups weeks in advance. Now, I don't know if this was, something that they came up with together. I guess we'll find out. I don't know if this was something that, Derek Shelton kind of like spearheaded, and, you know, Kelly just kind of helped out where he could, with those types of situations, trying to get the players into the right spots. I mean, in the end, it is the GM that is putting those players on the field, a GM that pushes kind of like the versatility of players and what they can do. I mean, right now, before we hopped in the show, we talked about it. We're talking about a second baseman who can play first base being kind of pushed to that position. You have Cruz getting his legs underneath him in center field. Uh, you have some aging veterans in Frazier. You have IKF, who a lot of people still want to see bounced around. So, I mean, to me, he has no pressure right now. It kind of helps that he is a local guy. I don't put too much stock into that, but it is kind of cool to see, a Mount Lebanon native, uh, Neil Walker's brother-in-law, kind of, get his shot in the spotlight. And he's a guy that, even when he was hired as the bench coach, I thought it was a good hire. Within the circles of baseball, he's a guy that's kind of like earmarked, for a manager's job at some point in time. But yeah, I don't think he ever saw, 38 games into the 2025 season that it's like, okay, you know, you had your little bit of showcase when Shelton had to go down to watch, I think it was his son graduate. But now, Donnie, this team is yours.
Yeah, and like you said, how instrumental is he in putting in those lineups? I think a lot of people have this idea. Okay, Shelton's gone, so now it's going to be a fresh start, but it's not. In my mind, that's a problem that I have with it. Is as much as I respect Don Kelly, but Donnie is just he's been Shelton's right hand man for this entire time. They've been working in lockstep. So it's not like somebody's kicking down the door to the clubhouse and saying, "Hey guys, we're going to get it together now because you're going to do it my way." The messaging is essentially going to be the same. And so I don't know how much different. Like somebody on Twitter asked, how long till they turn on Don Kelly, and my immediate thought was, well, when he puts out the same lineup that Shelton's been running out there for the first two games of the Braves series, and you're seeing that it's not quite as much. Maybe how he deploys the bullpen might change, but unless he shakes something up tomorrow in the lineup and maybe moves Brian Reynolds where he is in the batting order, and does something to show that we're doing different things. That's a problem and I thought the writing was on the wall for Shelton this time because he survived some times on the hot seat, was when they were asking him like post game, what's going on? What almost asking like, is there a plan to kind of get through this? And well, we just got to figure it out. It just felt like he didn't have any answers, didn't have a plan to try to figure out some of the answers. There was no direction. Was he a lame duck? Did he know that he was done? And it was just, I'm just going to ride this out. Why expel? It's too much brain power to try to figure this out because I'm already out the door. But it just seemed like he was lost as much as the players were lost, and there wasn't a plan to get to that next step.
No, and with Kelly, like you said, and like we talked about, like you don't have Horowitz back from his rehab stint yet. Nick Gonzalez is still not there. Dauri Moreta seems to be getting a little bit closer, so that's a guy that you would hope to be able to deploy in the fireman role
Yeah.
a little bit more. But I mean, bullpen arms are finicky, and he's a guy coming back from a very serious injury. So not even really knowing what to expect from him. You still have Jared Jones on the IL. You have Johan Oviedo on the IL. Right now you have IKF, who was one of your more consistent hitters on the IL. So I don't know how the lineup can look much different. I think that in these types of moves, I think I saw someplace that this is actually one of the quicker hooks that a manager has gotten like this early on in the season. Usually you make it to Memorial Day because I mean a lot of people say, don't look at the stats, don't look at whatever until Memorial Day. But yeah, I mean, I don't know what he could really do different. Like, I mean, we've talked about, giving, Cruz a little bit more protection, but even McCutchen hadn't been hitting. I mean, Cabrian is one of those guys, but if you move him into there, where's the protection? Because you want to get Brian Reynolds going. If you move him, down the lineup, different stuff like that. So I mean, it's gonna be a tough task for him. I don't know if people are really. I could see them turning on him because I mean, God, it's social media, it's whatever,
Yeah.
and if it's like flavor of the day, I would hope that they would just kind of understand that you know this is his first time, like, and that he is really being thrown into the fire of a team that, I mean, wasn't that well constructed, has also dealt with the injuries that I've talked about. And yeah, I mean, you would think that maybe if everything goes right for the Pirates, you have maybe 3, 4 more wins because you can't take away the injuries. You can't take away all that stuff that's happened. But if you look at the games that maybe they should have won or been in a little bit more, I mean, you're still going to lose some of those. You may win a few of them. So you're only looking at maybe 15, 16 wins. Yeah, obviously that looks better in the record books, but it's still kind of the same constructed team. And I think that's also kind of what's going to save Donnie Kelly just a little bit is that the two people that Pirates fans, I believe, have been blaming more than Derek Shelton because, I mean, a lot of people will just basically say what we've said. It's like, okay, he was given crap lineups for how many years? maybe started to turn a corner a little bit last year. Skeen's coming up early. Jones getting the call on opening day, getting some of the younger guys up here. Nick Gonzalez making the team out of spring training this year. So, kind of maybe pushing towards some of that kind of stuff. But I mean, not a ton that was done. So he's going to be shielded still by the sell the team chance, because there was never like a fire Shelton. You could get that going with a Let's Go Bucks. You could get that going with a whatever it may be. It was still directed towards that. And even, with some of his comments at the press conference where, he was asked, okay, you said you were accountable together. And he's, well, I'm still accountable. And him taking, some of the responsibility. I think one of his better quotes from that was, he said, if I did everything perfect over these first 5 years, would we be in this position? And he was just like, I really don't know. Maybe not. So to me, that's where a lot of the ire is going to be directed towards, is going to be Cherington is going to be in the moves that Cherington has made and the moves that Cherington hasn't made.
Yeah.
And especially, God forbid Horowitz gets up here and goes on an 0 for 20 streak, to start his season, which could happen to a decent amount of guys at this point in time in the season. I see people are already, putting out what his stats are in between Altoona and Indianapolis, and what is already been described by Cherington before it even started is like his spring training and the number of bats you want to get in for him. So I think that that's probably what's going to shield Kelly the most and give him at least somewhat of a leash, is because of the team that Ben Cherington has constructed. And, the call that it was just like pretty much like clean house. Like, yeah, this is a good first step, but I mean, there's still work to be done. But Cherington kind of did what we said he was going to do. I mean, he shielded himself with Shelton. He has now given, appeased, like as you said, social media for at least a little bit, appeased the raucous crowd. But I mean, it's going to come home to roost. But what if Donnie Kelly or the team somehow with these things, they hit their losing streak early on in the season, as opposed to later in the season like they did last time. And in some ways, it kind of balances himself out. And it was just be like Cherington could go to Bob and say, well, you know what, we probably did make the wrong call with Shelton. If we would have changed, if we would have went with Kelly, or if we would have brought in, fresh eyes or something, new motivation, look what they did. They got us back to, the same record we had last year, which at this point in time, people are calling impossible. So, we were able to do that. So then that buys him another year. So that should be, if anybody wants Cherington fired, that should be the fear, is that this thing does turn around. I want to turn around. I'm getting depressed watching these games. But for anybody that wants Cherington gone, that would probably be like worst case scenario.
Yeah, and maybe, like you said, the timing maybe works out for Kelly. Uh, Horowitz just went to AAA for his rehab. Nick Gonzalez, they say, is very close to going to Indy for a rehab. Dari Moretta going to Indy. Getting some of these guys back, because really, if you can solve that first base puzzle and make that a stronger part of at least half of the platoon that much stronger, because last year the bullpen was the issue. Those games fell apart. That's easier to put on the manager to say, oh, well, if you wouldn't have gone with this guy at this time and he gave up those runs, then, we would have won that game. We talked about that. If Bednar doesn't blow the game that he blows, they don't have the meltdowns that they had late, then it's a different feeling going into the offseason. It's a different record. It's an improvement from the previous season. This year, the problem is with the hitting. They're not producing the runs. And it's, who else is he going to put out there? Yeah, you have your Cruz and Reynolds and McCutcheon, He's trying to play the hot hand, with Valdez, and he's trying to navigate any way he can to get Triolo, maybe get him started, get some of these guys started. He can't go in there and swing the bat for him. It's a little harder to pull those strings successfully with the lineup, especially given what he has. But if those guys start hitting, it's a completely different season, it's a different feel. Well, they start scoring runs and can lean more on this rotation. That's such a strength, at least has been at times so far this year. We're seeing some bumps with guys like Heaney at the moment, but yeah, things could change quickly. Another problem I had with Shelton too is that he was supposed to be this hitting guru. He built his name as a hitting coach, and really through all the struggles, did he get involved? Did he put on his hitting coach cap to get into the cages? We've heard stories about Clint Hurdle doing that. That Clint Hurdle was a hitting guy, and he never let that go. He never, and that could be the experience, but he never let the job as manager overshadow the fact that that's where he made his name in the coaching field, and he would get right into the cages and work with the guys and talk to the hitting coach and come up with a plan together. I'm sure that Shelton had his fingerprints on what the hitting coaches have been doing, but really, did he take the bull by the horns and go in there? I think we heard some stories that maybe late last season he did that, got a little more involved. But I understand the idea of delegation and you hire coaches to do a certain job, but really, when it's your job on the line, maybe you get more involved, and maybe that's something that we just didn't hear about. We're at the mercy of what the beat reporters decide to tell us and what they find out in that kind of situation. But it would be interesting to know how hands on was he trying to get this hurdle of the hitting problems and the offensive problems, that it really is going to be the the question of whether or not they're successful this season. Last year, we were giving up too many runs, but we were scoring runs too. This year, just not scoring the runs, and it's hard to win by scoring 2 or 3 runs a night, if that, on any kind of consistent basis.
Are you looking for coverage of all four major sports leagues? NFL, NBA, MLB, and NHL. Look no further than SportsVival. At SportsVival, they are dedicated to providing quality sports analysis, up-to-date news, and original content with a focus on draft and prospects, analyzing how teams are built and how franchises evolve through their strategic decisions. Without sports, how would we survive? SportsVival, proud partners of Bucks in the Basement. Right now, you have a first-time manager, you have a first-year hitting coach, and that's where a lot of the issues come in. You have your pitching coach who, can't really say there's too many complaints about what he's done with the pitchers, just because, just look up and down throughout the system. Most of the stories that are being told and most of the hype that's coming behind prospects, especially in the upper levels, is from those pitchers. And yes, we knew that like this was going to be kind of the move that was going to happen. I didn't know if it was going to happen in season. But one I know that's not going to happen, or at least I don't think it's going to happen, would be Ben Cherington. Like that's where, like we said, he had this shield and Shelton, and people are saying, well, I don't want him in charge of the draft. I don't want him in charge of trades. Well, to me, 99% of the draft work is already done, and probably 50% of the draft work for even the next draft is kind of really underway. And people are saying, well, Steve Sanders is the guy that does the draft. Well, who was Cherington's right-hand man in Toronto? Steve Sanders. Who's the guy that he brought over to put him in charge of that in Pittsburgh? That's Steve Sanders. So even with that, it's just like we're talking about Donnie Kelly kind of maybe just being like within the Shelton mold, or, at least some part of it from working that long together. Well, man, Ben Cherington and Steve Sanders have been working together for almost a decade here. So,
Yeah.
I mean, that type of stuff was going to happen with the trades that, unless something crazy happens and the Pirates are sitting with the same record around the trade deadline and they go on some big long streak here, the types of trades that Charrington's going to make are the types of trades that I think that he actually does fairly well with. Kind of trading those 1 year deals for either the international prospect space or trading it for a lottery ticket in the FCL or the Arizona Complex League. I mean, those are the types of things. I mean, I think we even talked about it. Like people were talking about like trading Andrew Heaney, and I mean, it was put out there, and Ethan Holohan, kind of like double down on that is like he really technically can't be traded until June 15th unless he kind of waives the you know the right or the ability, because it's just like, well, why are you going to put me in this situation and then all of a sudden like move me out of it. So a lot of guys, like, they're kind of realizing I'm on a 1 year deal. I'm probably going to get traded at the trade deadline. It's a little bit more manageable in that sense. And especially like a lot of times you want to build up that trade capital. But yeah, I mean, those are the types of moves that, he would make. And, Bob Nutting and I always like, we always do this, and I always hate to give him credit for different types of things, or just even like either credit or blame. But I believe that if it would be like a bigger trade, because we do know that when Andrew McCutchen was traded and then brought back, I mean, one of the first things that Nutting said was, he didn't want to kind of make that decision to let him go. So, I mean, I feel like a big trade like that, it would have to be, something that would have to be cleared by Nutting. I believe that, the trading of Neil Walker, kind of still, ached at him a little bit, and he doesn't like to do that kind of stuff. So I think that it's just as if he was, in bringing McCutchen back, he was in the extension, for Brian Reynolds to kind of get that stuff sorted out. Like, I wouldn't have a problem. I think the draft board is fairly set at this point in time. I mean, it's not happening, too far from now. And then if Cherington is allowed to make those types of trades, and I just really don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, and I haven't had a huge problem with his drafting anyway. I feel like he, is pretty good at identifying some talent. It maybe goes safe a little bit more than we would want him to, but I think that going, Connor Griffin, it was a huge deal. I think that was a real smart draft pick. Um, I think even though Henry hasn't produced the way that we have wanted him to and expected him to, I think that the chess moves that Carrington and company made in that draft, to when there's not a consensus number one, to take a guy who could be perceived, could be seen and respected as a 1-1, but you knew he would sign under slot so that you could take some guys to sign over slot, and the way that was played and the money was managed, I thought that was really smart. So I don't have a problem with him handling the draft. And as far as these trades going on, I think if he was going to get involved with trading a Reynolds or a Mitch or any of these guys, I do think that in any circumstance, Bob has to be consulted because of the potential impact that it has in relationship with the players' union and the payroll and grievances. We're seeing what happened with the A's. I think that Bob has an interest in making sure that that's all presented in the best way possible. So anything with large amounts of money, I think that he's going to have to get involved anyway. But I think that something that Charrington is really good at the trade deadline is those baseball moves. Like the Nick York for Quinn Priester deal. I think that that's something that in the long run could potentially work pretty well for the Pirates. Billy Cook picking him up and making those kind of moves is a pretty strong part of his game. I think it comes down to it that he isn't given the resources that he had in Boston, and that maybe that he would have really liked, and maybe I don't know what he was promised or led to believe coming into this. Um, but really, when it comes down to it, he can only work within the constraints that he has. But at the same time, the trades that he's made haven't panned out. Think of all the guys we were excited about. I mean, Rowansi is someone that was a huge swing and miss, even up to when he came up to the major leagues the first time. We held high hopes. So it's you can identify talent and you can acquire the talent and you can hoard the prospects, but when it comes down to it, if you don't have that development, if you can't get those guys to take that next step, if you have a 40 man full of quad A players, you're not going to win at the major leagues. And in the current economic, we talk about this all the time, the current economic system of baseball, if you're not a big spender, if you're not a big revenue team, a big income team, then you have to catch lightning in a bottle. And really, realistically, with a couple of exceptions, Cleveland and Tampa Bay, I feel like even your opportunity to catch lightning in a bottle comes in short windows and maybe 6 years apart for even that opportunity to do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of the frustrating part is that I mean people out there will say that we're wasting a window here, we're wasting Skeens, and now an argument can even be made that you're kind of wasting Cruz at this point in time. I mean, an argument could be made that you wasted Reynolds because I mean, since his All-Star season, there has been, somewhat of a decline. I know that he bounced back a little bit last year. I mean, but this year, I mean, that's the other part is Donnie Kelly going to benefit from getting June and July, Brian Reynolds, or is this the year that, that bounce back doesn't happen? Because at some point in time in players' careers, that is a possibility. And to me, that's kind of the other frustrating part is, you know, I look at, Baseball Reference, I look at Fangraphs all the time and I sort by different things and I sorted by WAR and Brian Reynolds right now is the worst player on the Pirates by WAR at negative 0.7. Now, what you will say about WAR and not is that I mean he's not hitting. He had the injury, so he was in the DH spot, which unless you're hitting, a decent amount of home runs and stuff, and even Kutch on a 20 home run season is not going to pile up a ton of WAR there because you're not getting any of the defense or the defensive flexibility and different stuff like that. So, I mean, that's where yeah, we're happy today as a collective Pirates fan base. And I say that as the Pirates fan base. I don't know if I'm really super happy because still kind of depressed about how the season is going thus far. But I mean, that little like gasp or breath of air that we feel like we're getting today could easily, by the end of this weekend, just turn into sour grapes.
Yeah, and I think that Reynolds, anybody that has paid attention to Reynolds' career and and followed it closely, can see that maybe a turnaround is coming. Get through this month, get into June, and he gets hot in June. And though he might have to take a little break in June, statistically and historically speaking, when he comes back from that little break, he may get hot, and that could really make a difference in this lineup.
If